you know him. We had Ewandro probably 2 or 3 times already in person and virtual events. Such an incredible colleague. And in his bio, former chief interpreters of a UN agency, a co-founder of kUDO, and a conference interpreter with 30 plus years of experience. He is currently the Global Language Strategist at NIMDZI Insights. He is also a TEDx speaker, a TEDx author, and an experienced trainer of interpreters. Ewandro is the author of The Language Game, Inspiration and Insight for Interpreters, and he holds an MA in Conference Interpretation from the Middlebury Institute of International Studies at Monterey. So very happy to have you here again, Ewandro, and welcome.
Thank you, Lola, very much. Do you guys hear me well? Great, excellent.
Yes.
Well, Lola, as always, it's such a pleasure to be anywhere you are, basically. So anything you do, if I can be a part of it, you can always count on me. It just feels great being around people, you know, movers and shakers like yourself and Sergio as well. So I still have very fond memories of the time we spent together when I visited you in Toronto for one of the on-site opportunities that we had. Look, I'm going to try something totally new, right? I told Lola that after a lot of pondering, I decided, number one, not to use any slides. Number two, make sure right at the outset that I'm no expert in what I'm going to talk about. And I don't want to do this prescriptive to any extent. So basically, what I'm going to share with you are my own observations about how we move, how much we move, how little we move, how we eat or don't eat. What are the things that we hear that make sense and don't make sense? And I will share basically best practices from my own observation, having trudged this earth for 60 years, just completed. So Lola, I guess, called on me to do this and talk about exercise and movement, because in a previous life, before I became an interpreter, I was an athlete, or better said, I was a physical education student and later graduated from the University of Brasilia with a BA in physical education. So I spent most of my young adult years running, racing, doing triathlons, teaching kids how to swim and so on, which was in my case a saving grace. So it doesn't necessarily make me an expert in it, because, you know, when, you know, last time I looked at any book having to do with this, I was probably 40 years younger than I am today, maybe 35 years younger than I am today. So don't trust the advice to be any bookish advice, if you will. But it was in my case a saving grace, because I come from a family of sedentary people and people who have paid the price of being that immobile. So my parents, my sister, most of my family, they have never seen the value of moving anywhere, doing any kind of exercise. And by virtue of, you know, being admitted into a school for, you know, fitness and sports and so on, I started getting into it and so on, and it became a lot of fun. So it changed the course of my life to the extent that it made me aware of the need to move. It made me aware of the need to do something with our bodies, right? So I'm calling this presentation, if you will, Moving Tips for Terps. But it's also, you know, it goes beyond just movement. It talks a little bit about sleep. After Lana, I can't talk much about sleep because she's already preempted most of my talk. And then, of course, exercise and overall stress prevention and longevity, right? But the thing is, as interpreters and translators and so on, we tend to be all up in our heads, right? We tend to be, you know, more on the intellectual side of things, and I am in that camp for most of my time, right? And what that means is that we tend to be up in our heads most of the time and slightly to one side of our heads, which is very analytical, and we think we can think things through and so on, to a point where we forget that we have a body. And we're sitting in the booth for, you know, days in a row and not realizing that there's this vehicle that sometimes we think is only there as transportation for our brains. But actually, it's something that we should do something with and that we can derive a lot of benefits from if we actually get it to move. So we have that body, and we have to understand that life is supposed to be a long game. So the life expectancy is increasing. And our profession as interpreters is one that's very, very long. So I remember my time in Geneva, some of my French interpreters were in their early to mid 70s and were still doing a good job. So you want to be ready for work when you're in your 70s and probably even in your 80s, especially now with RSI. If you keep your voice in good condition, if you keep fit enough to sit for extended periods of time, there's a lot of benefits that can be derived from doing a little bit of exercise and doing it regularly. So be ready to live as long as you can and die at an old age, but as young as you can, right? Now, I don't want this to be prescriptive, as I said, to any extent. And I don't think we need any education as far as realizing what we ought to be doing. Now, you don't need to be told to breathe, do you? You don't need to be reminded to eat. If anything, I need to be reminded to stop eating, right? But most of us, we don't need a reminder at all. It's about time we should eat, right? Again, we have those conventions that I should be eating now, I should not be eating then. But for the most part, you have this mechanism in your body that tells you when you're hungry. And if you listen to it, you're going to be well off. And animals, if you look around, they don't need to be told when to exercise and when to rest. You don't see a tiger waking up in the morning and say, "Oh, okay, so let me do a little bit of high intensive interval training, and then after that I'm going to do my affirmations, and then I'll be ready to go hunting, and maybe by the end of the day I'll bring home some supper." No, they don't think about it, and they'll just do what their systems intuitively tell them to do. And that's what I'm kind of training myself to be able to do now that I'm becoming more mature. Because again, keep in mind that I've been a high level athlete who was all in the business of pursuing results and so on, and stressing my body out to a point of almost no return, lesions and all sorts of injuries and so on, thinking that I was very, very, safe and very healthy. And, came from that to being just a translator sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours a day and not exercising much. And finally finding some balance, which is where I think I am currently and where I would like to keep you back to. So my philosophy these days is the KISS philosophy, right? Keep it simple, stupid, as we say, right? Stupid in this case is me. So there's probably a million things we ought to be doing and that we could be doing, but the stress of starting to consider everything you should and ought to be doing and so on kind of mounts on top of everything else you're not doing, to a point where it becomes just another preoccupation. It's not healthy. So I'm here to number one, suggest that, of course, keep it simple to the extent that what we need to do are the basic things. And I'm going to suggest here the approach taken by Nuno Cobra, who used to be a trainer of Formula One stars back in the 1990s. Nuno Cobra is a Brazilian trainer, Brazilian coach, who started training the Formula One star Ayrton Senna, had excellent results. And then he started, working with Mika Hakkinen and the other guys, and they all became world champions, and they all, upped their game to a point where they were really high performing. But Nuno Cobra has three main pillars when it comes to wellness and performance and health: sleep, nutrition, and exercise, in this order. So number one is sleep. So I wanted to go back and emphasize everything Lena said about how important it is to sleep as well and as long as you can to satisfy your needs to the fullest. And then nutrition. You can exercise all you want. You can go up and down mountains and so on. If you're not eating the right stuff, you're not going to lose weight. You're not going to put on weight. You're not going to find your balance. So nutrition is the second most important thing. And then exercise, but again, within reason, which is what I'm going to advocate here. So assuming you don't know where to start, assuming you're at a point where you feel you're not exercising enough, or you're thinking about going back and so on, assuming you need to pointers on how to start, I have a few unorthodox pieces of advice to you. Number one, the most important thing I want you to do is drop the guilt. There's a lot of guilt associated with, I'm not doing enough. Oh, hell, I should be doing this. I should be doing that. And comparing yourself to your booth mate, to your significant other, and so on, which again just adds to the stress. So drop the guilt. Be compassionate to yourself. Take a good look at you, see what needs to be done, what you would like to do, and then move forward on that basis. But by all means, don't beat yourself up thinking that there's a benchmark that you ought to achieve. And if you're considering a new activity, my advice to you is that you look around, right? I'm a Brazilian. I'm used to playing soccer. If I'm back home, now when I'm in the US and living in Seattle where it rains every day and nobody plays soccer, it would be unwise of me to look for a soccer pitch. It's just going to add to the frustration. So look around. Look what is available. Look at what is it that people do. What's the most natural kind of activity that you could easily engage in? Because don't use, oh, I got to find a soccer pitch as an excuse not to move again. So look around, see what's available, and go with the flow in that sense. But also look back. I'm going to appeal to you and ask you to go back in your, down your memory lane and go back to what used to be fun, what used to be significant. What were the things that kept you going, that made you feel alive? So try to recover that sense of wonder and that sense of playfulness, because it's going to be important, because no physical activity, no routine is going to be sustainable unless you make it fun and pleasurable, which is my next piece of advice or suggestion. Make everything you do fun. Go for the things that, engage your mind and your body in such a way that the minute you come back from that activity, you're feeling better than when you considered going there in the first place. And if it's about food, make it pleasurable, right? If you decide to sit in front of a meal and eat that meal, don't punish yourself thinking how many calories are in that meal and so on. This is a decision you got to make before. At the time you're in front of a meal and so on, enjoy every bite and go for it. And again, don't chastise yourself for not being the best person you should be. But most importantly, make it all very purposeful. So don't move just because somebody told you got to move. Don't eat just because we all got to eat. So think about, plan ahead, plan what is it that I like to do? What is it that would bring me joy? What is it that my body that agrees with my body as well? So plan ahead so you don't find yourself in that predicament where all of a sudden you find yourself accompanying somebody to a fast food restaurant and now you're stuck with fries and a burger that you didn't want to eat in the first place. So make time for those decisions before time so you know what to do. The next session I have on my sheet here had to do with sleep. And again, I had a little script that I wanted to cover here, but by now I'm just going to say, go back to Lena's presentation and follow everything she said, because she's the real expert in this. Again, in my case, I've been following already Lena's advice to the extent that I don't track my hours of sleep any longer, because it varies according to where I find myself in life. And my gauge in terms of, okay, was that a good night? Was that not a good night? Is how well I performed the next day. Sometimes I perform really well on just 5 hours of sleep or 5.5 hours of sleep. Sometimes I feel like I need more time, and it will vary again according to your travel, according to your meals, according to anything. Again, listen to your body. Look at what's working and not working, and keep what's working. But again, I don't want to belabor the points that were very competently presented here by Lena. Just go back to her presentation and get tested. As I said, as she said, is a good, very good piece of advice. Now, when it comes to food, guys, remember that we humans are omnivores. There's very little things that would kill us if we eat it. So you can eat meat, you can eat vegetarian, you can eat vegan, you can eat just fat and protein, or you can go high on carbs. It all goes depending on, again, what works for you and what makes you happy and what works with your system. And we all have differences, right? And again, we're free will too. So you may decide to go this and that way, follow whatever goes with your conscience. If you feel the vegan is the way to go, I'm not here to criticize anybody. If you feel, meat eating is the thing for you, go for it. I don't eat meat. I haven't eaten meat in 40 years, like beef. I will have occasionally a piece of bacon here and there, and it's working for me. But again, keep in mind that unless you've been told by a doctor that something doesn't agree with you, like you've been tested and you are allergic to something, I would be careful with elimination diets where you completely rule out gluten or this and the other thing. Because again, we're omnivores and there's benefit in trying a little bit of everything. The key here is moderation. But as my wife says, remember everything in moderation, including moderation. So there's a day when you're just going to go out and have a blast because we're all humans and we have to socialize, and then you pick up where you left off. So everything in moderation, including moderation. So that's my advice to you on food. And again, food, guys. We've reached a point where we have forgotten what that is. Food is not Snicker bars. Food is not Cheetos. Food is real food that you extract from the earth, or animals that you whose flesh you can eat if it's okay, if you're okay with that. So again, move away from anything with a barcode on it and so on. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about exercise. My first piece of advice to you is get winded. Okay, there's something in exercise, and this is a little bit more within my comfort zone as a quote unquote expert. There's a principle in exercise called the overload principle. You can't get better. You can't improve your fitness level unless you impose a certain level of stress on your organism, on your system. So if you go out, if you go to the gym and you bench press, say 20 kilo, right? And you do 20 reps. If you keep doing all that, and that's all you do day in and day out, it's not going to benefit you beyond a certain point. So you have to stress yourself out. But this is acute stress versus chronic stress. It makes you more fit and adaptable to chronic stress. But you have to push yourself. So get out there first thing, get winded. Walk if you're totally immobile. If you're totally sedentary, start by walking, then start jogging, and then run, and then swim. And again, look around, see if it's too cold or too hot. Go for the things that make you feel alive and happy and so on. But by all means, have some sort of a cardiovascular activity that gets your blood pumping, your heart's pumping, and so on. And that's going to be great for you. Anything I say about exercise, there's one golden rule. It has to be regular and moderate. Athletes are not healthy. Couch potatoes are not healthy. In between is a sweet spot where you're doing enough exercise to activate your systems, but not stressing your body to a point where it only adds to the oxidative stress. So it has to be regular and it has to be moderate. Then, of course, you need to resist the movement to a certain extent. You got to go to a gym, or you got to go somewhere where you lift rocks or you push some, those tires that people are fond of in the, what's the name of that activity that people get crazy about? Anyway, it will come to me. So you got to push, some weights around. You're going to do anything that, forces your muscles to, again, get out of their comfort zones. And here I'm talking about three basic things: push, pull, and squat. Basically, that's all there is to it. You can do it in alternate days. You can combine all three movements in one given routine and repeat that every day. But it's very important that you don't overdo the pulling as opposed to pushing. So one day, all you're going to do are biceps curls or whatever. It's the the pull aspect of it, and then you're going to push. This is all good for your back and your triceps and your the front part of your body. So it's push, pull, and squats, because you need to be strong in your legs as well. And again, in terms of regularity, the weightlifting part of your routine has to be intense. It doesn't have to be very long, but it has to be very intense. You need to leave the gym thinking that, well, this has been an exercise. Well, perhaps even thinking that, well, maybe I overdid a little bit. Just be sure you didn't. Make sure you have the guidance of a good personal trainer if you can. But the moment you leave the gym, you're all pumped up and you feel a bit uncomfortable, a little bit of that discomfort. And that's not necessarily bad. So that's actually very good. It has to be very challenging on your body. And especially as you age, one thing I'm going to advise you to do as you hit the gym is to warm up your joints. Not necessarily go on a treadmill and do the 5 minutes of jogging before you actually exercise, because that's been proven not to help much. But your joints need to be prepared for the exercise. You need the liquids there to start moving and flowing in a different way before you actually engage in those bench presses and so on. Now, if you are not convinced yet that exercise is a good thing for you because you're too intellectual, too up in your head, I advise you to go check out a TEDx presentation by Wendy Suzuki. She talks about the incredible effects of exercise on cognition, memory, focus, attention. And she's a neural scientist. So it's all based on science. Rather than have me summarize the points for you here, just go there. It's a fun, interesting TED Talk. Again, Wendy Suzuki. It's not even a TEDx, it's a TED Talk. Very interesting. Her point is that even one workout, even one single workout session will have immediate effects on your mood, on your attention, on your focus, on any of those things that we all value as interpreters. So if you need another excuse to exercise, if you all you want to do is a better interpreter, a better translator, really on top of things and really focusing on what you're going to do, exercise for that reason. Then it's all going to work to your advantage anyway. And the final point I want to make is that most of what I said before will have a lot of value if you do it by yourself. But we are social beasts, we're social animals. And a big part of keeping our sanity in terms of, going beyond even our body and what makes us tick and our bodies, gets our body to work as it should, is connecting to other people, is talking to your friends, is making time for those meaningful connections that are going to add quality of life to those moments when you're not working, and even those when you are working. Now, especially these days with everything that was said here in terms of mental health issues and so on, by all means, make time to talk to your friends, ask how they are, how they're doing. I've lost already 2 very good friends, interpreters, to suicide. And one of them, I was on the phone with a guy 2 days before, and it didn't occur to me to check further. I could feel that he was not in the best of places. And I don't know, maybe I was too busy, maybe I wasn't too sensitive, maybe I was just not sensitized to the need to stop and really find time and make time and be present, as Lola reminded us to be as we interact with our colleagues. Again, have a workout buddy. Reach out to your friends, take time to listen, make time for parties, schedule them in your calendars, schedule your workouts in your calendar, schedule your reading time in your calendars. These are activities, again, as one of the slides I saw here, I think it was Lena who said, was that you, Lena, who showed us a slide that said, self-care is not selfish. I love that. Yeah, so make sure you include time in your calendars for all of those activities. Now, one final point I want to make is that about 2 years ago in New York, during at the height of the pandemic, I got the 2 shots and the booster and so on for COVID. Every time I did that, I went on my bike, got the shot, and went for a 2-hour bike ride on Central Park. I asked the guy, can I do that? Sure, if you're not feeling tired and so on. I have a feeling that didn't work to my advantage, because after the second dose, I started feeling very weak in my legs, to a point where I couldn't go up the stairs in the New York Metro. And I had no clue what was happening to me. I went to every doctor. They tested me for everything. They didn't know what was going on. Eventually, the theory they kind of floated was it is probably the effect of exercise right after the vaccine, maybe. Again, I don't know what it was. I'm back to normal now. It took a full year for me to be able to feel strong and powerful in my legs again. And in those months where I was, maybe thinking, maybe I'm not going to walk again, I don't know what's going on and so on, I became very anxious. I became almost depressive. And I went to see counselors. I went to talk to people and so on. And nothing really helped. I didn't want to be on medication. I never took anything. But there was one thing that it blew my mind how powerful that was. And if you don't do anything else, if you don't take anything else away from this presentation, but this piece of advice, I will consider myself satisfied. It is breathing exercises. So rather than do meditation and this and that, because when you're too anxious, you can't even sit down to meditate, let alone find nirvana or anything, unless you're really well trained in that. But I read a book that changed my perspective on that, changed my life. It's called Breath by a guy called James Nestor. The full name is Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art. I advise you all to go check out that book from a library or buy it from Amazon. I can share the links later where you can find it, or just look him up on YouTube and you will find some very good interviews. I started doing some of the exercises he proposed in the book, but later I just went crazy and doing all sorts of different breathing exercises to a point where I was doing, all things considered, maybe all in all 2 hours of breathing exercises every day. I remember having trouble walking up to the place where I was going to sit down and do the exercise, and then sitting down and doing 40 minutes of purposeful exercises, and then standing up and walking like nothing was happening. So it has an immediate, incredible effect on your parasympathetic nervous system, and it trains your system to start getting things where they need to be. So by all means, don't take my word for it. Give it a try. It's easier than meditation. It's easy enough for you to incorporate in your daily routines, and it will change your life if you take it seriously. So guys, I have no clue what my new style of presentation, the one I just introduced here, how it came across. Maybe you would have preferred to see a lot of beautiful slides. I have no clue. And again, I wanted to keep it just this conversation. Don't take me as an expert. I'm just here spitballing some of the things that worked for me, and I would love to hear what your experience has been and what has worked for you. Thank you, Lola, very much for your time as always.
Thank you so much, Ewandro. There were so many gold nuggets in that. And the